At least 10 people have been killed in a suicide attack in Turkey's biggest city, Istanbul. 15 more have been injured. Turkish authorities have already confirmed most of those killed are foreigners. 2 others were injured and are currently receiving treatment in hospital. The epicenter of the explosion was close to a tram station on Sultanahmet Square, the city's main tourist district. Istanbul-based journalist Natalie Carney brings us more details from the scene of the attack.
Well, I'm here on the grounds of Sultanahmet, probably the most popular tourist site in all of Istanbul. There's no tourist that comes to the city without coming to this exact square. Just behind me here is the famous blue mosque, the Sultanahmet Mosque, and just to the right of it is the Egyptian obelisk, and it is at that location where the explosion took place this morning, just after 10 a.m. local time. It was said that there was a group of elderly tourists right next to the site when the explosion occurred and are likely the ones that suffered the casualties this morning. We are hearing that 10 people were killed, 15 were injured, many of those critically, so that death toll could rise as the hours go on. This is going to hurt tourism in the area and likely see a decline in tourists wanting to visit this city. The government is blaming the attack on terrorism, saying that it could have been a Syrian suicide bomber associated with Islamic State. Security forces are saying it does look like it was the doings of Islamic State, being the fact that it is in such a popular tourist area, attacking civilians, attacking tourists.
Well, Turkish media reports claim that body parts belonging to the suicide bomber have allowed authorities to already identify the suspect as a 27-year-old Syrian. Well, some Turkish officials are also saying that ISIL is likely to blame for the blast. Well, for more on that, let's cross live to Turkish journalist Can Erimtan. Can, good to have you with us today. It's just been several hours since this attack, but the authorities have already found a suspect. How is it possible that so much detail is already revealed about the attacker?
Well, to be honest, to my mind, it's very suspect. How were they able to do that in such a small amount of time? It's very dubious. In other words, we have to take these announcements with a grain of salt. Was it really the Islamic State who organized this attack? I mean, the government wants us to believe so, for very good reasons, obviously. Like I said before, when I came on the program a couple of hours ago, to my mind, it's much more likely that some Kurdish faction was behind the attack rather than the Islamic State. So. Maybe it's a government attempt to steer the news into a certain direction that we're facing now.
And in his recent speech, in his reaction to this attack, President Erdogan said Turkey's at the forefront, the front line of fighting terrorism, and in particular the Islamic State. Do you believe Ankara is doing enough to fight this?
To fight this, well, in his speech, Erdogan was reiterating that in his view and in the view of the Turkish government, the terrorists belonging to the Islamic State or to the PKK, the PYD, they're all the same as far as the Turkish government is concerned. And for that reason, he very easily put the blame on the Islamic State. Whether or not Turkey is prepared to take care of these terrorist threats aimed at it, I don't really think so. People in Turkey are very, very concerned. They're very afraid because ever since the June elections backfired and new elections were called for November, the country has been living in fear of terror attacks. And actually, as a matter of fact, Erdogan and his government, they used these attacks as reasons for people to convince people to give their vote, to cast their ballot in favor of the AKP, because they claimed that they would be able to take care of it, that they'd be able to stem the terror threat. But now it clearly seems to be the case that they're not able to. That's as far as I can see.
And speaking of that terror threat you mentioned, we've seen allegations now for several months in the global media about those Turkey's operations over the Syria-Turkish border. Has Turkey really left its door open to an enemy through these operations?
Oh, most definitely so. I mean, the Turkish government was cooperating with certain factions in Syria, Ahrar al-Sham, possibly also the Islamic State. And the fact that people were using Turkey to go to Syria is a well-known fact. In other words, Turkey was probably digging its own grave by means of doing all these things. But at the moment, the Turkish government is carrying out a very severe attack against the Kurdish separatists in the southeast of the country. And to my mind, this attack in Istanbul and Sultanahmet is probably more likely to be connected with those attacks than with the Islamic State in Syria.
Can Erimtan, Turkish journalist, thanks so much for joining us to give us an update on that story. Good to have you with us today. Well, Sultanahmet Square is the old historic quarter of Istanbul and one of the city's top tourist attractions. It features the well-known monuments such as the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia Temple, as well as the Hippodrome and the Egyptian obelisk. Well, tens of thousands of people visit those sites every single day. Well, following today's tragedy, the German foreign minister has confirmed its nationals are among those wounded. It also warned of potentially more attacks in Turkey. German citizens have now been advised to stay away from crowded places. Denmark is also following that warning. Political commentator Marwa Osman believes this new attack will be a fresh blow to the Turkish tourism industry.
I mean, first of all, the tourist industry was heavily impacted about a month or so when the relations between Turkey and Russia were cut. That was a very hard hit to the tourist sector and touristic sector inside of Turkey. And now such attacks, it's horrific. It's very tragic.